What we're going to do today is we're going to first talk about remote early intervention. And we thought this was a very timely topic as we're all in the midst of providing supports to families remotely. And then we're going to stop after we talk about remote early intervention, look at the questions that you post. So please do post your questions in the Q&A box at any point during the presentation, and I'll get back to them right after I present for a few minutes. And then we'll move on to ways families help their babies learn. And then we'll do the same thing and open it up for questions then too. So at any point, as Rich said, feel free to add your questions into the Q&A box and we'll make sure that there's time to answer them. So remote early intervention, or providing early intervention with the professional somewhere other than with the family, is not really that new. There has been different providers who have been using remote early intervention, a lot of times in rural areas, to be able to provide supports to families, including when there's not enough professionals around where they can travel between families, so they do provide supports remotely. There's also been some research on remote early intervention. It's primarily been done with families with babies who are deaf or hard of hearing. And that research has really shown that the impact and the outcomes are as good as with having the professional in your home. Now, certainly that's not always the way that we're used to it, and there are some things that won't be able to happen, like your early intervention professional actually demonstrating for you with your baby any strategies that you talk about, but they certainly can still demonstrate. And so what I'm going to do, and you have your handouts, I'm going to share a couple of tips around what you can do to get ready for your early intervention visits. So before your visits, what you can think about during your early intervention visit, and then what you can do in between visits. And now certainly for families who are used to having home visits, this might be a little bit easier of a transition because you are used to being with your professional and brainstorming together. And for those families whose early intervention services have been happening in centers, like in childcare programs, or in certain therapy offices, that might be a harder shift. But again, early intervention and doing early intervention remotely, we do have some evidence that it can work. So a couple of things that you can think about before your early intervention visit. And the first thing is really, to talk to your early intervention professional to identify what's the best technology for you. It really needs to be something that's easy for you to use. And so having a conversation about what might that look like? Is it FaceTime? Is it Zoom? Is it a Google app? And really agreeing together on what's going to be the easiest way. And remember that, you can also do this through the phone as needed if the video technology isn't up and running yet. And then as you think about what you want your visit to be, you can think about all the things that have happened since your last visit, and what do you particularly want to focus on? And once you focus on that, then you can really think about, okay, what do I need to have? So for example, when you're thinking about what do I really want the outcomes that we're going to work on be, and then that's going to drive where you want your visit to happen. When you think about what are those routines that you want your early intervention professional to see, that lets you then think about, okay, what objects do I want to have in easy reach? And then where should I set up the video? So if you're thinking about, oh, I want my professional to see, how feeding goes, then you want to make sure that the video is set up in a way where your early intervention professional can see what you're doing as well as what your baby is doing, because your early intervention professional is going to give you ideas and you strategies to use. It might have to be tweaked a little bit once your early intervention professional comes on screen, but at least you can kind of have a sense of where you want to be positioned and where you want your professional to be. And you can let your early intervention professional know ahead of time. Let them know what you want to focus on and where you want the intervention to happen in terms of what routines you want to work on. And if possible, really planning that with your early intervention professional will let you both be on the same page before you start. So then during your visit, in your virtual visit, the first thing to think about, is that this is new for you, this is new for your early intervention professional, and both of you are figuring it out. And that's okay. You're problem solving this new technology together, and you can still make it a purposeful and helpful experience. But also be okay taking it slow. We don't have to rush through it, especially when it's new for you and it's new for your early intervention professional too. So I would really start off with really talking about, what went well since the last visit. What strategies did you and your early intervention talk about that you were going to try in between the visits, and how did that go? It's really, you're going to be using the strategies in between visits during your everyday routine. So it's really important that your early intervention professional knows how you feel about the strategies and how well you think they worked. And also, what questions do you have? What came up for you as you were using those strategies in between visits? Now, as I said before, what could be hard is your early intervention showing you strategies. So if there's strategies or you're used to your early intervention professional showing you on your baby before you try out the strategies, that's the step that could be a little bit trickier when we're doing it remotely. But your early intervention professional might have videos that they can quickly show you, or they might have, and it might sound a little silly, but they might have a doll that they can use just to show you how it might work. Or even though it's through the screen, they can actually do the strategy to you, so you can get a sense of what it looks like. So again, it wouldn't be specifically on your baby, but they can kind of give you a visual of what it would look like. So not just describing it to you, but actually trying to show you as well. And if at any point you have questions and you're not sure what your early and professional is asking you to do, tell them. The most important part, and really for any early intervention visit, but most particularly virtually, is keeping that open line of communication, letting them know when you don't understand, or letting them know when you're not sure what you're supposed to be doing or why you're doing it. Then a really important part of the visit is you having an opportunity to try out those strategies and ideas while your early intervention professional is there and is watching you with your baby. Because what we really want at the end of the visit is that you feel comfortable and you feel confident that you can use any of the ideas that you talk about. So as you're trying out the strategies, your early intervention professional can talk you through it. And your professional might say, okay, try this instead, or how does that feel? And that's really a back and forth, and again, a time for you to share how you're feeling about it. And then after you try it out, or even while you're trying it out, again, share what you're thinking, and then also ask your early intervention professional for their feedback too, because it's how you're feeling about the ideas, and it's how the early intervention professional is feeling about the ideas, and putting that together to, again, make sure you feel comfortable with them. One of the things is, because in virtual early intervention, you are doing all the doing. You're the one who's going to be interacting with your baby the whole time. And so you can ask your early intervention professional to take some notes for you. And they can write down things like, remember to, when talking about a certain strategy, or here are some places we talked about you could use it, and different routines. So ask them to take those notes for you. Since they're going to be on the computer, you know, it's easy enough for them to just jot down notes and then they can send it to you. That way you've got little reminders in between your visits of what was discussed. And so the bottom line, again, is that at the end of the visit, you should feel comfortable and ready to use any ideas that you and your EI professional agree to. And if not, really let your early intervention professional know. So and now I'm going to cover the in between your early intervention visits. So you might have had one, and what can you do before the next one? Of course, in addition to using the strategies. And I just wanted to give a reminder to please do add any questions to the Q&A because we'll go over it in just a little while. So in between visits, so your one remote visit is over and you're going to use the strategies before your next visit. One of the things that you can do is really jot down what you want to talk to or go over with your early intervention professional. So what ideas did you use? What ideas did you decide not to use? And it's okay if you chose not to. Perhaps you thought it was a good idea, but then when you really, you know, had a chance to use it, you didn't feel as comfortable with the strategy as you thought, or it didn't really fit your routine or your family as much as you thought. And that's all okay. But keeping a track of that in whatever way that works for you, whether it's an app on your phone, jotting it down on a Post-it, or, you know, on a pad that's on a magnet on your refrigerator, whatever works for you, just sort of jot down the things that you want to talk to your professional about, and including what questions you have. Also, don't feel like you have to wait till your next visit to get any thoughts and questions answered. You can certainly reach out to your early intervention professional in between and, you know, say, you know, what were we talking about with this idea, or I'm not quite sure, and let them give you feedback. And the feedback might be, well, let's wait. It's not a huge idea. We can certainly do it once we're back together. And also consider video recording what you want your early intervention professional to see. So, you know, sometimes, and we all know this, right? Babies don't do what we see them do at a different point in time. And if you have a chance to record something, you can send it to your early intervention professional ahead of time, or you can go over it with them in the visit, but it'll actually capture something that you're talking about that might not happen within that remote visit. And then, you know, if through the week something changes from what you agreed was going to be the plan for the next visit, just let your professional know, you know, that something's changed. You know, you thought you were going to want to work on feeding, but now you want to work on turn taking, whatever it might be. You can certainly change it up. And early intervention professionals are really good at shifting on the fly, but when it's remote, it's easier for the professional to know ahead of time that the plan has changed, because then they can prepare for it at the same time you're preparing for it. So those are just some quick tips. And I just want to see, okay, we don't have any questions. Okay, I do see some in the chat here. Reading some research showing telehealth services as effective. Yeah, so I could share. I'll ask them how to get it to you. But it's also a lot of the work is coming out of Utah State University, and they have some early intervention research there too. And then you can also you're welcome. And I'll also send out a link. The Division for Early Childhood of the Council for Exceptional Children has an entire web page devoted to what they call telehealth or remote early intervention. And there's loads of resources there. There's different webinars and different videos showing it. So there's certainly different options available for that.
Bonnie, we would be happy to email the registrants once we get those links.
Great, thanks, Rich. I will send a whole bunch out to everybody. Okay, so if any questions come up about remote early intervention, I'm going to move on to ways families help their babies develop, but you can certainly ask questions about remote early intervention as well. And the three big ways that I'm going to, there's three big areas that I'm going to talk about. But one of the things is, and some of these things that we talk about, families are already doing. You're already doing it with your baby. Families are always helping their babies learn, whether their babies are in early intervention or not. And lots of times though, families don't realize all that they really are doing to help their babies develop, because they just see it as parenting. They just see it as, this is what I do as I'm, interacting with my child and as I'm, going about the day, and not realizing how important those small moments are in helping your baby develop. So as I talk about these different areas, some of these are going to be things that you're like, yeah, I'm already doing that. And that's absolutely great. And you absolutely are doing them. So the three areas that I want to share with you are, one is around an idea that's called serve and return, which is basically noticing when your baby serves or initiates or does something, and then you return, sort of like thinking about it as a tennis match. Based on what your baby does or says, how do you return it back to them? The next one is what I call upping the ante. So giving your baby just a little bit of a challenge, just sort of upping the ante when your baby is ready. And then we're going to talk a little bit about using the ideas you and your early intervention professional came up with. So in terms of noticing when your baby serves and then returns. So again, this is an idea where it's really, the bigger concept is called responsiveness, but it's basically that when your baby does or says something, and then your interaction back to that baby based on what they did or say. And again, this idea overall might sound really, really simple and something that you're doing all the time, but it teaches your baby so many things. It teaches your baby that as a baby, I matter. You're teaching it that when I do something, my family member recognizes it and responds to it and knows what I'm doing and what I'm saying. And that gives the baby this idea of initiative and control, and that, I can have an effect on my world. And so that the baby then learns, well, if I do something else, then I'm going to get that back too. So they keep getting reinforced for serving it. And so it's a really big strategy for babies to learn. So what are some ways that we do this? So when the baby serves, what you can do is repeat or add to what your baby is doing or saying. So, if your baby, bangs 2 blocks together, you can bang 2 blocks together. Again, I told you, real simple, but the baby is learning and is learning that they can initiate. So, or you can add to it. So if your baby is banging 2 blocks together, you bang 2 blocks together, the baby bangs 2 blocks together, you drop your blocks into a bucket. Now that's something new, right? So you're adding to what the baby is doing. You're showing them something new that they can do with those blocks. And that can get really exciting for the baby. And then they'll think, oh, maybe I want to try that. But it's still serving and returning. It's still around blocks. It's still around the banging. You're just adding something new to it. And the same thing if your baby is saying something. So say your baby is babbling and just saying ba ba ba, and then you say ba ba ba. Your baby says ba ba ba, and then you change it to something that starts with a B that's in their vicinity. So you might grab their blanket and say blanket. That's adding to what they're saying, or bottle. And one of the things that's really important of the serve and return is to keep that turn taking going, keeping that back and forth going. And what that really is also the foundations of communication. So when we communicate, we take turns. I say something, you say something, I say something. And so any of that turn taking really helps the baby learn how that back and forth, even of communication, is happening. Another thing that you can do is describe what your baby is doing, what you're doing, or what's happening around them. And so if your baby is looking at something, that is a serve. Simply looking is a serve. And so you talking about it is giving them that language, and it's giving them opportunities to put together what they're seeing and what you're hearing. And so they're building vocabulary and they're building an understanding of their world. And when describing what they're doing and you're doing is the same thing. They're learning action words connected to it. And that is a sense of serve and return. One thing is also waiting for your baby to respond. So if your baby serves and then you return, sometimes it might take a little bit longer than we as adults think it should take for your baby to respond. So sometimes just waiting it out a little bit gives your baby that time to process and go, oh, wait, how do I want to respond back to you? So giving that wait time can be important. And then another way is giving babies choices. And so choice making is another area where babies can initiate and have opportunities to make decisions. And choices could be yes or no. So, you know, it could be a choice of, do you want this toy? And it's just a choice of one. And the answer is yes or no. And it doesn't have to be words. It could be your baby pushing it away. But then what the baby's realizing again is that what I think matters and that I have an opinion. But also making sure that those choices are choices you're okay with. So after a choice of one, then you can move to a choice of two, and then three, starting with choices that are actual objects, and then moving to, and then you can, where the baby sees the objects, and then as the baby learns the names of the objects, you might be able to just say those names. But make sure that those choices are choices you're okay with. So if you're not comfortable with your baby making a choice of what food your baby can eat, that's absolutely fine. Don't give a choice, either don't give a choice around eating, or choices that you feel okay with, like which color cup do you want, or which color plate do you want? So you can identify ways to make those choices that you feel okay with. So then the idea of upping the ante. So when we're upping the ante, this really is creating this opportunity for your baby to learn something new. And so what we know for everybody really, not just babies, is that we learn best when something is just a little bit hard for us, but not too hard that there's no way we can achieve it. There's no way that we even understand what we're supposed to do, and we're not even sure how to start trying. And then certainly if something is too easy, then that's something we've already learned, so we're not learning anything there. So it's upping the ante by just making something just a little bit harder. And we can make things a little bit harder by adding more expectations. So it might be, you know, that if, you know, a baby stacks 3 blocks, we want them to, you know, we're going to try to encourage them to stack 4 blocks or 5 blocks. It could also be that they're going to do something a little bit longer. So, you know, if your baby is learning how to wait, you might start having them wait just for a little while and then increase that time. And then you can also make it a little bit harder. If we help a lot, we might take away some of the ways that we're helping them. But again, we only want to make it just a little bit harder. And only doing it when your baby is ready. And by ready, it also means that your child is attentive and not tired, and is something that they're interested in engaging with. And so when your baby is trying, because what we know too is that trying to figure things out and problem solving, whether or not they succeed, are really important skills when your baby grows up and goes to school and they're trying with different things at school. So when you've identified what you want them to do that's a little bit harder, you know, really being there and encouraging that trying. And it's okay if the opportunity that you created wasn't a little bit harder, it was almost too hard, that's fine. Then jump in and help. You can certainly jump in. You don't want your baby to get frustrated, and you can help when needed. You can also teach your baby to ask for help, and help is a problem-solving strategy. So, you can just say the word for them or sign the word so that they can learn that they can ask for help. But you certainly can jump in even if they don't ask for help. And you can decide, when do you want your baby to keep trying and persisting, and when has your baby had enough? You don't want to push to the point where the baby feels frustrated. It's fine if they don't succeed the first time. They can try again. You can make it a little bit easier. And then also, we really do want to always show enthusiasm when your baby's trying. And then think about, when do you want to use praise? So praise is good job, or that's great, which is different from showing enthusiasm, which is you got that in, or look at you trying. That's just sort of talking about what your baby is doing. And what we want to be careful with, and praise is great when needed, but we don't want to replace your baby's own motivation and excitement with looking to only get praise. We want them to get excited about trying and achieving on their own. And then also, babies love for things to be predictable and know what's going to happen next. So keeping things predictable and consistent can help your baby be ready when new things happen. And so then you can make things unpredictable. So even thinking about, if your baby gets used to that turn-taking routine of banging blocks together, and you're in this back and forth, and then you want to up the ante of putting it in a bucket, because there's this predictable back and forth happening, they're ready for that unpredictability and can handle it. So then I'm going to talk about using ideas for that you and your early intervention professional came up with. And again, feel free to add questions to the chat. So, like I said before, during any early intervention session, it doesn't even have to be a remote early intervention, you and your early intervention professional are going to agree on ideas and strategies that you would use in between visits. And so what are some ways that you can use those? And these are things that you'll probably talk to your early intervention professional about. But you really want to use them during everyday routines, during what you and your baby are naturally doing, that's a part of your life. And that's because babies are not great, and all babies are not great at what we call generalizing, which is they learn something in one activity and apply that learning to another activity. They're not great at that. We as adults can do that. We might learn something in a classroom and then use it in our home or at work, but that's really, really hard for babies to do. So if you're using the strategies that's going to help your child develop within those routines where you want your baby to actually use those strategies, then it's going to be easier for your baby to use them because they're going to learn them there. It's also really important to have lots and lots of opportunities for your baby to practice. That old adage of practice makes perfect is there for a reason. And so the more opportunities you can give your baby to learn, the better. And so the more places where you can use the strategies that you and your early intervention professional came up with, the more your baby is going to be able to practice. And as they practice it, then they're going to start mastering it. And this is a good question to ask your early intervention professional, even in remote early intervention, is, okay, how might this work at another time? So say you are working on turn taking with your baby, and you and your early intervention professional worked on turn taking around putting toys away. Well, where are other places that you could take turns? Do you want to take turns, picking out clothes, or do you want to take turns, getting toys out instead of putting them away? Do you want to take turns just back and forth turn taking with language? So thinking about all those times that you might do it. You might be taking turns turning pages of a book. So you can talk with your early intervention professional about that. And also you want to make any strategies that you're going to use during those routines, you want it to be fun and interesting and that your baby has a reason to do it. So, you know, when things feel hard or feel like a task, and babies feel that too, they're going to be less inclined to want to do it. So you want to make it interesting for them, and why they might be using a strategy. You want to motivate them, you know, to use the skill. So if they're learning to pull to stand, you know, on a coffee table or on a couch, putting a toy up there for them to go get is a reason why they would pull to stand. Or if you want your baby to be using gestures to point or tell you something, what can they see? What's available for them to actually point or reach to let you know that they want something? And it's really important too that, you know, with all of these strategies and ideas is that, you know, you give yourself a break and that you don't have to use any ideas that you learn in early intervention all the time. While we do talk about using them lots and having lots of opportunities to practice, realize that, you know, your baby has loads and loads of time to practice in between intervention visits. So it doesn't have to be constant. It can just be a couple of times here and there, and that's going to build up very easily and over time. And so most of all, you know, you really want to just enjoy your baby, especially this time when, you know, everybody's stress is a little bit higher, and certainly babies can feel when we're stressed out. And so really enjoying your baby. And again, you know, these ideas that I'm sharing, lots of them you are already doing. You know, and that's great. And it's not even something you have to think about because you're already doing them. And then maybe there's a couple of ideas that you might want to try. Thank you all for coming and participating. And I hope you got a little bit out of this. Thank you.